Our next speaker is from NOAA's Climate Program Office. Ned Gardiner does a lot of work putting together visualizations and content for NOAA's websites, and has really taken a step over the last couple of years with Ned's work and the work of David Herring in Silver Spring at NOAA and some other colleagues that are really trying hard to deliver content for you guys to use on the air and for you to refer to your viewers to learn more about climate change. So what I'm going to do is load up Ned's presentation, and then we can get started. And we're right here. And you put it on the desktop, actually, didn't you? Okay. Let's see if we can find it real quick. Yeah. Okay. Okay, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Ned Gardiner.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And thank you, David Herring, for not coming so that I could be here, because I'm just delighted. He was just working with Margaret at the NCSE conference, and we've been working, as Dave said, very hard to reintegrate the brain in a way that our evolution has not set us up to do. We, as a species, have a very highly developed frontal lobe, and that partially distinguishes us from other organisms, with the exception of some of our colleagues, I suppose. This is the region of the brain where higher reasoning takes place. It's the area that allows us to make complex decisions. And so it's appropriate, following Margaret Davidson, that we talk about how the evolution of our brain, just for a moment, makes it difficult to get the Chamber of Commerce and the ocean scientists speaking the same language and talking the same way. So I'm going to deliberately divert us for a moment away from climate science and away from broadcast meteorology, and I want to involve you all in a brief experiment. And I would like to ask Dave over here to mute my microphone. We're all going to watch this and just pay attention. All eyes up front, please. Please keep silent.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla?
Raise your hand if you saw the gorilla. Okay.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla.
No, not kidding.
If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
So the idea here is that when we engage our System 2 thinking, where we're paying close attention to something in minute detail, we're actually less activating the responsorial side of our consciousness, the quick reactivity, decision making. And I like to analogize this to weather and climate. Is that weather is what we're responding to, what the Earth system is responding to moment to moment. Climate is what's the long-term driver. And it's really the integration of these two ways of thinking that I think we as a community need to get better at. Communicating and using information about the long term and the short term. And this kind of hit the popular consciousness in 2011 in a big way with Daniel Kahneman's work on thinking fast and slow. This was a major bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, this guy is a rock star of academics. He's got something like 66,000 citations, people citing his work, because he's been carefully, methodically measuring people's response to how do you make decisions? How do you see the world? How does that influence how you make decisions? Now, this is very important for all of us as we're framing issues for the public. His work has really influenced people in helping us all realize that the way we were brought up, for instance, influences who we trust and how we trust that information. This is, if you dive into this work a little bit, I think you'll find some really great principles for your editorial decisions. Because you're really ultimately trying to build a market, expand your market, reach more people. And as Margaret said, it does no good to keep talking to the same 150 people. And you guys are the experts at that. You're the trusted sources for our nation about weather, about science more broadly. This is what our surveys show us. You are trusted sources. So my goal is really to work with this community over the long term to use climate information. And so on climate.gov, which is a project Margaret participates and her colleagues at her former position at the Coastal Services Center are one of 4 major partners developing this capability for NOAA, where we're centralizing access to data, educational resources, decision makers' tools, but very importantly, media and articles and images developed for your audience, for our shared audience. And so I just want to give you some insight into some production processes we've been innovating to develop media, but also show you how you have an entry point into accessing high-quality visualizations, many of which you've already seen in this conference, I will say. Jennifer yesterday used our sea ice visualization. I could use a bottle of water, if someone wouldn't mind. Okay. So, thank you. That was very helpful. So we are making these visualizations intentionally to make climate information accessible. And we provide a lot of written material at a level that we feel a broad public of interested people can access and use. And I'd like to think of you guys as one of our key target audiences. And I am going to talk about video production. We've been taking the assets that we produce for the web, static and visualized time series animations and articles, and rendering them into video form as an example for this community to start seeing yourself in the role of producer, a talent, of editor and writer. And one thing you'll see in our products is that our voice is a NOAA voice. We don't editorialize. We don't focus on climate change. We focus on observations. So far, we've been focusing very intensively on observations and what it means now for the United States citizens, primarily. So I'm going to kind of touch on our writing process, how we develop visuals, where we get the information from NOAA, and some of what we're learning by giving voice to people out in the country. How are farmers dealing with climate variability and climate change? How are oil companies who have to manage Port Fourchon? You had a Grand Isle relative sea level rise graph in your presentation. We went down there and we talked to the people responsible for keeping access to Port Fourchon, which is the nation's largest port. They bring in 20% of the oil supply that we consume. So oil companies have to deal with climate change. And so we tell that story. So I want to emphasize that our writing style is not going to have the voice that you will have. Jim Cantori has the opportunity to kind of shake Bloomberg and say, you need to evacuate. We don't do that. We're just kind of mainly presenting information as we see it. I'm going to start with an example, though, just so you can see how we're approaching this problem of making climate information understandable and accessible. And we're very fortunate that we're working with some great on-screen talent. In the name of Deke Arndt, who's the Climate Monitoring Branch Chief at the National Climatic Data Center. How many of you know Deke? Okay. So great. This will be your first chance to see a very skilled climate communicator who's inside the NCDC.
Drought, cold, and massive storms were among the devastating climate-related events that struck the United States in 2012. These events were incredibly destructive and disruptive for people across the country. It's official. 2012 was the hottest year on record for the contiguous United States. March kicked things into high gear, breaking its own record by a huge margin. July was then the warmest of more than 1,400 months on record, dating back to 1895. September was the 16th consecutive month with warmer than normal conditions, the longest streak in the nation's climate record. With all that heat came prolonged drought, which is ongoing as we begin the new year. Crops suffered, and the Mississippi River approached all-time lows at several locations. Without enough water, barge traffic on the river, critical for the nation's commerce, nearly halted. The drought also set the stage for massive wildfires. Some of the largest fires occurred in New Mexico, Colorado, and Oregon. Across the nation, nearly 10 million acres burned during 2012. Many of the 2012 extreme events were heat-related, but some parts of the U.S. experienced record cold and massive winter storms. In Alaska, January's temperature was 14 degrees below the long-term average, setting records throughout the state. Anchorage received over 11 feet of snow last winter. Further south, a massive winter storm brought rain and snow into the Pacific Northwest in January. The storm produced hurricane-force winds, and 250,000 homes lost power. A massive derecho swept from the Great Lakes to the East Coast in June 2012. A derecho is a widespread, long-lived windstorm associated with a band of rapidly moving showers or thunderstorms. Over 250,000 customers lost power along the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast for several days due to downed trees. The derecho caused 28 fatalities, and the total damage was estimated at around $2.5 billion. Sandy made landfall near Atlantic City, New Jersey on October 29th and set the all-time lowest barometric pressure reading for the Northeast. Sandy's large size and track brought record storm surge to many locations, including the Battery in New York City, which saw water levels close to 14 feet. And Sandy didn't stop there. She also brought blizzard conditions for the central and southern Appalachians with more than a foot of snow falling in 6 states. 130 fatalities were reported, and over 8 million households lost power due to this historic storm. These massive events came from local ingredients mixed into and with the larger climate system. For example, the heat and drought were related to persistent high-pressure systems, while Sandy was born in a very warm and warming tropical Atlantic. The climate system is evolving and bringing these ingredients together in changing ways. These complex systems help climatologists to examine trends from our data records, as well as explore the behavior of the Earth system changing in real time. A better understanding of the relationship between climate and extreme weather is challenging, but it's important, and it will help our nation become even more climate smart. For climate.gov, I'm Deke Arndt.
So a few things to take away from this. There are rendered assets for each of these productions that we produce and can be available on a broadcast schedule. The data visualizations you saw in here get turned around within about 24. This whole production is about a 24-hour cycle from when the data are validated to when they're, so that this is actually published when our press release goes out to you. So all of these assets are pre-rendered and available. We also use a real-time visualization engine. If you saw that globe spinning, we're able to put things up in real time and have Deke react to those things, point out features. So we are working with different formats deliberately, because we know that some of you have the most sophisticated visualization engines in the world that captivate audiences by the millions. We can't necessarily compete with that, but we could provide georeferenced data that you could insert. In some cases where we render something that explains a whole concept, you might want to go ahead and take and use that, like the sea ice age visualization, for example. But we want to work with you to understand what you would use, and I will make a deal with you if 4 people get in touch with me and pull our assets into a broadcast or even your blog. I will commit to continuing to provide, these assets on deadline before the press release that goes with these, monthly reports. We produce these videos twice a month, once for the global summary and once for the national summary. The national is really where most of our headline getting information comes from the National Climatic Data Center. I will say we don't see video production as confined to National Climatic Data Center Climate Monitoring Branch, but right now that's where we're focusing. That's where I sit in Asheville, North Carolina, and we'd like to expand this program, but more importantly, we'd like to help you use these assets and reach your audiences. That's a much more important goal for educating the nation. So, as I said, our primary production is focused on Climate Watch magazine, which is our online periodical. It's updated more than once a week with high-quality visualizations and articles that are written in a clear style. And we're going to be debuting a news section for climate.gov, which is probably going to be of great interest to you, because we are going to serve up core climate data sets that give you a monitoring perspective primarily about what's happening in the climate system, and you can go into the historical archive to look at climate information. And I'll show you some examples of what we have planned for that. This is our working wiki for the climate conditions section here. And what you see is just one parameter. We're focusing on temperature anomaly relative to, we're going to choose the 20th century average as our baseline. So the colors will represent deviations in degrees Fahrenheit, both positive and negative, from that long-term average for a given month and year. So for a given month and year, we subtract off the climatology for that month for the entire 20th century. We're going to focus on the U.S., but our plan would be in the future to be able to do this globally or regionally. In addition, we're going to use very simple plain, clear language to describe what these parameters are, so that we're not talking about climatology wonky speak, confidence intervals and statistics. It's just, was it warmer or cooler than usual? How do we get the data in clear, plain language? And finally, as I mentioned, we use multiple formats ourselves for video production, and we want to learn how you would use, what kind of format you would use. So we would provide a very high quality JPEG. Some of you may not find that useful, but some of you may just go ahead and use that. It's going to be a projected, clean graphic. A KML version for those of you who are using some kind of geo-browser, any kind of GIS, you'd be able to use that. Or just a low resolution, you just want an image on your web page, you can grab that. So I should emphasize again, this is planned activity for 2013, but I'd love to hear your feedback, whether you find this valuable. I did a survey at the broadcasters meeting of the AMS back in Boston, and most people were really interested in the US aspect of this. And if you agree, just send me an email. We'd love to hear from you about your interest. Okay, vetted content. We know that NOAA is a trusted source of information on climate and weather, and that's largely built on the dedication of the Weather Service. The Weather Service has built a fantastic reputation in our country and has branded NOAA as a trusted source. And what we are doing is building on also the incredible dedication of the climate scientists throughout the agency who use and compile weather information and render climate information from this. So you are also trusted sources of information in your communities and for your audiences. So this would be a good partnership if we could get you using our vetted content. One great example is looking forward using the Climate Prediction Center's outlooks. These are published every month, but we focus on the seasonal outlooks that come out 4 times a year. And we've kind of tweaked their style, which is a little bit more difficult to read, using practices that we've learned through publishing for museums, for educators, for readership online. And we've done surveys and we've learned what people can and can't understand. There's a lot of data and information in these maps, but we've made them understandable for a broad audience. And you'll find that these outlooks, we have temperature, the precipitation outlooks. This is an actual published example from the winter outlook at the end of fall last year. We've seen a lot of great examples in this conference from how we render high-level results from major reports, such as the Arctic Report Card, which is an annual international effort to describe what's happening in the Arctic. And so, our editor, Rebecca Lindsay, works with our visualization team, Richard Rivera, Hunter Allen. Hello out there in Webland. Thank you for your great work. We also work with the Environmental Visualization Lab at NOAA. And all of these sources are wonderful for you to pull in assets. So I just wanted to show you. So Margaret mentioned Albedo of Greenland. Here we have a very high quality rendering of changes in albedo of the Greenland ice sheet. So if you actually wanted to explain how the absorption of radiation by the sun is actually changing on the Greenland ice sheet, we've rendered this into a really understandable graphic, incorporating some complex remote sensing results and even including some optical data so you can see what drives this albedo change. This is a false color-coded map. This is a true color where you can see the melting itself from MODIS imagery. We've seen a lot of examples of this graphic, the the extent of melting that happened on Greenland in 2012. So we render these things. There are massive changes happening in the Arctic system, and this summary really allows people to kind of apprehend all at a glance. Ecosystem changes, changes in phenology of plants, changes in ice cover, and you can see how the big picture kind of comes together really quickly. I just want to show you our rendering of that sea ice visualization, as well as the volume of ice in the Arctic Ocean. We saw this already, but we've slowed it down and really tried to unpack it and explain it to a large audience. Here you see the winter maximum and the summer minimum, and around 2000 is when this trend starts to really accelerate, and you see the bottom literally dropping out in the volume of sea ice. And as Jennifer pointed out, an 80% difference between current conditions and historic conditions at the minimum. So these are great assets that you could use online, on the air. We'd love to help you do it. If we're not providing these assets in a way you can actually use, call me, email me. I will work with you to rectify the problem. We'll get it on the air. That's really what we want to see, working with you. We also make our own whole story videos about, for example, the Arctic Report Card, where we interview the scientists, allow them to explain what they're seeing. I recognize that's not the editorial style you're going to take, but you might want access to the transcripts. You might want to ask your own questions. When we have someone on camera, maybe we can film it for you and get you the video. I'd like to discuss what you'd be interested in receiving. We do some on-location work. And this is where I think the power of storytelling comes out even more, because NOAA scientists, yes, they're trusted. Yes, they're providing solid information. But when you hear it from your neighbor, and when you see yourself in the story, you're going to get a much stronger sense of why you should pay attention to climate. Great example actually does focus on NOAA's response to the Missouri River, but Missouri River flooding back in 2011. But we got footage from the field, and we help people understand that there is a climate perspective that's essential for planning for and responding to these extreme events. This is an example I think I'll show. Wasn't necessarily planning to, but I think I will show it because it came up in Margaret's talk. This is looking at the oil industry and their need for climate information in Port Fourchon.
Deepwater activity in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where our energy is. That's where we're moving forward into the future. There would be an $8 billion impact to the gross domestic product of this nation if Port Fourchon was inaccessible for a 3-month period.
The experience we've seen is when Hurricane Katrina and Rita did major damage in the Gulf of Mexico into this coast, into our refineries, we saw price spikes at the gas pump, and they were severe. The continuity of supply of energy that this country relies upon is so critical. I mean, we have no downtime, and one of the issues really comes down to is, do we have an operating roadway to a functional port, to a service base supporting the production that's going on in the Gulf of Mexico today?
That's why we always bring back this key word all the time, which is resiliency. This country has finally seen that, especially in light of Katrina and Rita, Gustav and Ike, and all the other storms that have come through. We understand that resiliency is key for us. We understand it here at the port. Our tenants here servicing the oil and gas industry understand it as well. You'll see that as far as construction goes. You see buildings elevated. You'll see hardening of structures because we know that as we go, so does our energy supply.
And I've got several more things I want to just leave you with. I'm really sorry I can't show this video. I really want to show this video. I'm tempted to just show it anyway.
We have 10 total.
Okay, I got to show this because I just love the voice of the main character. I just think he's capturing what we're all thinking and dealing with every day.
Headed just
in an important way.
northwest of Headland, Alabama. We're going to Myron Johnson's farm. He's a local farmer in this area. He's very innovative.
Behind us, we have a wheat crop. To look at it and see what its potential is really exciting. A little concerned about cool weather coming in March. We could have this crop destroyed by a freeze. Even though it looks that great, it could be just that bad. We don't know what the end result's going to be, but we can only hope for the best.
I see the climate predictions as being able to help us forecast 3-4 months in advance, maybe longer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
They had us forecast from the previous August when we was at that meeting in Camilla that it's going to be warmer than normal and drier than normal.
Yeah, so we went ahead and decided that the best thing we could do is get these cover crops in, get them large, get them killed as quickly as possible, and store some moisture. We first told them, look, man, our weatherman can't even predict the weather for 2 days. How y'all going to tell us what's going to happen in a year? If we had not applied that and killed cover crops early, stored moisture, we would absolutely have missed a crop. I was raised with people that's all they had. You know, from old school, they didn't have the technology we had now, so they observed. And you combine that with the new technology, we can make some pretty good choices. It's all a part of the tools that we use to make some decisions. And a lot of it's, you know, it can turn into quite a bit of money if you make the wrong one or the right one, so it's pretty important. You know, actually my cotton yields have been great since then. William, you doing a good job. Well, the old system with the Farmer's Almanac, still got a lot of faith and trust in it, especially if Mama tells me something, I'm probably going to go with her over the climatologist, because she will cook every now and then. The El Nino and La Nina are new terms for me, still trying to learn them. Sometimes I get confused which is which, but you know, we know they're there, we know they're facts, no doubt about it. What we're trying to figure out is how exactly they're going to influence the weather and how that will influence us. I don't think the problem is the parts. It's somewhere between, probably between there and over here. That would be me.
Yeah, no doubt about that. You know, they're producing our food and fiber. They're sharp people. They're always forward thinkers. They always want to do a better job, and they're thinking about the environment. They want agriculture to persist because we'll need to feed this world for many generations to come.
There's no doubt. I know I was born to farm. I find a lot of fulfillment being here on the farm. You know, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, so if we make a great crop, it's just icing on the cake. So we like cake and icing, so if that comes, we're happy as well.
So just the value of finding voices out in the field to talk about climate information in a way that's not wonky and overly scientific. It's just your crop. It's your water supply. It's your roads is essential. And I think that that's the great opportunity for broadcast meteorologists to influence their news executives in the newsroom and work together to help them understand how to use your expertise to expand editorial scope of what's happening now and to, you know, bring more dollars into your program areas, frankly, build your audience. So I did touch on editorial and writing, the fact that we have visuals that we want to provide to you. We will bend over backwards to get you something in a format you can use. We intend to do that, and we think we're covering that base now, but we just need to build more relationships. So email me and let's see what we can do. We do have trusted sources of information in NOAA vetted content. And we do have some on-location footage that we can redistribute. Likewise, we'd love to have your footage. That may or may not be a starter with you, I don't know. But it does help us tell a story if we get on-location footage. So ultimately what this is about is helping people respond moment to moment from the core of our brain, which is responsible for making decisions quickly, and use higher reasoning and thought processes about what's happening in the trends in the Earth system. And I think that's what we, working in media production, can uniquely do, because we can integrate the big picture with what's happening day to day. And that's what's really exciting about, I think, working in media production for NOAA, and I hope that perhaps that could rub off on all of you. I do need to mention that I've been working with a really great scrappy producer and director and cameraman, Kurt Mann. He goes out individually and sometimes captures these stories as a one-man show because we don't have a lot of funding. So I wanted to give him a shout out, but also a great team. You can see their credits in our videos. But more importantly, I do take seriously the fact that we are representing, and we are at the very top thin veneer of presenting a lot of effort, scientific effort that's gone into archiving and making a high quality climate record for our nation and for the world. That's something that we value, and I think that the nation will value if you begin using it in your broadcasts more. So thank you, Dave, for this opportunity.
Questions? Matt, is there a microphone? Margaret, can you hand Matt the microphone? There you go. Thank you very
Margaret.
much.
Hi, Matt Safino from KGW in Portland, Oregon. I love using data like this, some of the animations especially. So I'm just going to tell you what works for me. And maybe it works for some other folks in here. Animations are better than still images. NASA is a really good template for that. When they put images, we were looking at one of their jet stream animations the other day. You can download it in several different formats and resolutions. That makes it easy for us in television to incorporate into our systems to be able to use. Something that's been on my wish list for a long time, I've talked to Dave Jones about this for a while, but whenever there's especially a big convective event, there's usually some super rapid scan operation imagery that goes out. It's 1-minute data, really high resolution. It's hard to come by. The best place I've been able to find it is on the University of Wisconsin's blog, and they had quite a bit of it when one of the hurricanes last summer was hitting the Gulf Coast. But it's really cool imagery, and if that was more accessible to us, I know the FO has put out requests for that all over the country if they're going to have significant weather. And if that type of imagery was made more available to us broadcasters, even if it's not real time, but near real time, if there's a thunderstorm outbreak in Oregon and I can get that the next day, good enough. I mean, I'll show it because it's great data, it's great visuals. So that's kind of at the top, one of the things at the top of my wish list for stuff to get.
The satellite.
Can
Yeah.
I just make one comment real quickly? The 1-minute imagery, I think everybody in the room will be happy to hear, is will come much more frequently when GOES-R goes up, because and that'll be about 2015. So it's going to take a little while. But the satellite that's up there now, that's an on-orbit storage, sometimes they activate to take 1-minute imagery, but it has to be requested by a scientist that's a PI associated with the satellite program. Or the Weather Service, if they make a request, then they can get that imagery as well.
Yeah, they do all the time. I mean, I get the emails from that the FO is requesting that imagery, so it's out there. I mean, that's great, 2015, but it's there occasionally now. And then finally, one thing that I think would be helpful to us as broadcasters, when there's a weather event, you folks can really help us with perspective. Putting a tornado outbreak in Alabama into climatological or historic perspective, because I don't have time in Portland, Oregon to go research tornado frequency in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, when I've got 5 shows I got to do on a daily basis. And if you guys do stuff like that and you do it in a visually compelling way, I think that would be also be useful to broadcasters in general.
Okay, so a couple things to respond to. One is we also do have the satellite division of NOAA has a visualization lab that also does provide sort of a meteorological perspective. Occasionally they'll be able to get the rapid scan imagery, and they post them here at the Environmental Viz Lab. It's a close partner of ours on climate.gov. So I mentioned that to you. I've developed my own product, which is a global mosaic of all the geostationary satellite data, which is a great way to show systems moving across the globe and teleconnections. I've been really happy to work with that. And we can talk about that some more. On your point about contextualizing, we work very closely with, for example, I focus on Ned Gardiner. We've been working very closely with him, and the climate monitoring branch and his team put out monthly reports that do just that. They put things in deeper context. We are working closer with them to give them that visually compelling and that storytelling angle on what they're providing, but everything we do points also into their website so you can get into the guts of those reports. They're a great team and they're very committed to, so I think you'll recognize maybe even from TV interviews some of the other faces and names in that team, and I'd be happy to keep you in touch with them. I wanted to point out also, and I'm glad you brought this up, that when these press releases go out, we have webinars for the media specifically. So we can, we should get you signed up for those, and you can participate when you're available, if you're available, and you'll see the highlights from these reports. And you know, maybe we'll give you some embargoed content ahead of time if we produce a visualization or something. So that's the kind of dialogue I'd like to build with this community.
Brad Panamich, NBC Charlotte. To kind of piggyback on what Matt was saying, some of the formats that work best for these TV stations, and I'll speak for myself, but I think it would work for a lot of other people. The data KML and KMZ files are great because a lot of them are drag and drop now, either on Google Earth or in our systems and our mapping software. And then from an animation or movie standpoint, MPEG-4 is a great format because it works just about on everything. And then animated GIFs are always great, especially for social media, because you can throw them on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and it's not a movie. People can view the animation without downloading a movie or having to play it. So those type of formats tend to work really well with getting information out quickly for us.
You had me until animated GIF. Just haven't done a lot with that because we tend to do slightly more complex visualizations that require a rendering.
Does that a lot with their animations. They're big satellite, and they're huge. They take a while to load.
Yeah.
But the nice thing, because it's a GIF, it just, you can throw it anywhere, and people can watch an animation without having to play a movie, actually.
If I got a lot of feedback like that, I would, yeah, I would.
So it's amazing. Sometimes he has like a 80-frame animated GIF, and it's pretty cool.
Okay. Well, I'll look into it a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other, Chris?
Chris Strager, just a National Weather Service, just a quick question for you all. I mean, I hear this and I see this stuff here, and there's stuff out there, I don't know where it is, and I work for NOAA. Would it help to have this stuff maybe collected under a single repository, a one-stop shop for media? I know for myself, as I go out and I'm trying to wave the flag for Weather Ready Nation, but it doesn't help very much if this stuff is scattered all over the place. And like you say, you don't have time to be fishing for this stuff. If it was collected into a single place, would you be more likely to maybe use some of it? I guess I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe make it a little bit more friendlier to find and search for.
I would say, like Matt said, the NASA seems to be a good model, because sometimes when they put out animation or any kind of information, they'll have 4 links at the bottom in 4 different formats and resolution sizes, SD, HD. It's amazing. They give you, for everything they put out, they give you that same 4 or 5 different options of how you want to download that data and use it. And it's consistent. It's always the same.
Yeah, right.
That's very
gotta
true.
Do some running with the big dogs and maybe get some overflow, because a lot of us on our team actually worked extensively with NASA in the past. So we're very aware of that, and some of what we do does build on best practices learned from NASA. On the other hand, it's also true that we don't have a whole dedicated visualization building with massive supercomputers and large staff. We're a few people. We're going to do the best we can to serve this community. Chris mentioned the Weather Ready Nation. We're trying to parallel that kind of verbiage with this idea of a climate smart nation, because that's what we want to build together through resilience in these focal areas that NOAA has around climate, which is reducing vulnerability to extreme events, dealing with drought, protecting our coasts and coastal infrastructure, managing risks in marine ecosystems, and mitigating and adapting to climate change. So these are really our foci editorially, and we'd like to work with you to get those into your broadcasts.
We're a little bit over, but we have one more question from Jennifer.
Well, I think to add to the, you were talking about under one website or one resource, something that's not expensive at all that NASA does is the listserv that we get, the email instantly. Then I can see, is that a topic that I need, something like that. But I constantly get emails from NASA on if they've got a visualization, if they've got, you know, a new report out. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full web page, as long as we can just get updates every time there's something new.
Okay, so maybe a broadcaster's listserv. That sounds
Jen,
like a good idea.
Do you have the microphone to Margaret?
I'll just speak up.
Margaret, they want it for the web audience.
You really could. I'm from Texas. I oriented my presentation as an issue presentation. I didn't do the commercial. But Google Digital Coast. So there's a whole lot of data, not just NOAA stuff, interagency, intergovernmental, even private data sources, web-enabled GIS. We've already bought the licenses, tools, visualization tools, even stories. Just Google it. You'll find it. Look at the partnerships as well. And if you got any questions, ask me about it. But that's my commercial.
Awesome.
But it's about the coast. It's only about the coast. For you guys in the Great Heartland, wait, I'll get there.
Great. Thank you very much. Ned, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that does it for, we're going to take a 15-minute break. It does it for the first session this morning. When we come back, we're going to learn about Western Water Resources from Jeff Lucas from University of Colorado. And we have a little video to show about how Jeff cores trees. We went out yesterday across the slope and actually cored a tree with permission from the U.S. Forest Service, of course. And we'll take about, let's take about 12 minutes or so. We'll be back a little bit after 15 past. So for those of you online, take a look. If you haven't seen this video of Breckenridge, take a look. It's a beautiful place out here, and today is just a gorgeous day. So we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.